I am Naomi Calder, and I am 32 years old. On the last night of the year, I sat alone in my narrow studio apartment in Harborview, watching distant fireworks bloom and fade beyond the frost-lined windows. The city sounded alive, laughter echoing through streets, music drifting upward, car horns celebrating early victories. But my room felt sealed off from all of it. My family had decided it was best if I didn't attend their New Year's celebration. Not because I was busy, not because I declined, but because, according to them, my presence complicated the image they wanted to project. As midnight crept closer, silence settled beside me like an unwanted guest. Before we continue, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Stories like this reach people who need them most because of your support. My phone vibrated weakly against the couch cushion, startling me. I frowned and muttered, "Who's texting me now?" I wasn't expecting anything meaningful. No invitations. No warm wishes. Certainly not from my family. But when I unlocked the screen and read the message, my breath caught so sharply it hurt. The words glowed back at me, heavy and unreal. It was the kind of message that doesn't just change your evening, it reroutes your entire life. I stared at it, heart pounding, unaware that this moment was about to rewrite every label ever placed on me. To understand why that message mattered so much, you need to understand the family I came from. Growing up a Calder meant growing up inside expectations that felt heavier than walls. Our family townhouse in Ashford Heights stood tall and immaculate, all stone and symmetry, like a monument to generational success. My father, Leonard Calder, was a senior financial strategist whose name carried weight in rooms I'd never been invited into. He spoke little but observed everything, peering at people over rimless glasses as if quietly calculating their value. Calder children don't drift, he used to say. They dominate. My mother, Marian Calder, came from old wealth and wore it like a second skin. Her posture never slouched. Her smile never lingered too long. At dinner parties, she spoke effortlessly about charity boards, private galas, and international retreats, while sliding looks in my direction that said, "You're the exception, the error in the equation." My older brother, Elliot, was proof that the system worked. He'd followed the path flawlessly. Elite prep school, top law firm, rapid promotions. By 34, he was a senior partner, married to Vanessa, a woman who spoke 3 languages and raised 2 children already enrolled in prestigious academies. My younger sister, Lydia, wasn't far behind. MBA from an Ivy League school, engaged to a venture consultant who liked to explain technology as if he personally invented it. And then there was me. At 32, I worked mornings at a neighborhood cafe and evenings delivering food across the city. When people asked what I did, my mother smiled tightly and said, "Naomi is still figuring herself out." Sometimes she added, "Everyone's journey is different. The way people speak when they've already judged the destination." What no one in my family knew, what they never bothered to ask, was that my nights belonged to something else entirely. After my delivery shifts, when the city quieted and exhaustion softened into focus, I taught myself how to code. I watched tutorials until my eyes burned, rewound lessons until they made sense, scribbled diagrams into notebooks stained with coffee rings and hope. I whispered encouragement to myself when errors stacked up and progress felt invisible. For 3 years, I built something in silence. I called it ClearCoin. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't designed to impress seasoned traders. It was built for people like me, people curious about cryptocurrency but overwhelmed by jargon and arrogance. ClearCoin translated complexity into clarity. It taught before it sold. It explained before it demanded trust. I built it the way other people write diaries. Honestly, quietly, and with pieces of my heart embedded in every line of code. Not once did my family ask what I did after work. They assumed I wasted time. I let them. The moment everything fractured came during Elliot's promotion dinner. I had stepped into the kitchen to refill my wine when I heard my mother's voice carry through the doorway. "That's Naomi," she said lightly to someone I couldn't see. "She's our family project. We're all trying to help her find her direction." My hand tightened around the glass. The word project echoed in my chest like a verdict. At Thanksgiving that year, an aunt asked loudly, "So, Naomi, what do you actually do?" When I answered honestly, she patted my hand and said, "Well, someone has to do those jobs." The table went quiet. My father looked down. My siblings avoided my eyes. In that moment, I felt myself vanish inside a room full of blood relatives. The official rejection arrived 10 days before New Year's. I was steaming milk at the cafe when my mother called. Her voice was calm, rehearsed. "Naomi, about New Year's Eve," she began. I stepped into the storage room. "What about it?" She sighed softly. "Your father, your siblings, and I feel it may be better if you make other plans this year." I closed my eyes. "You're uninviting me." "Oh, sweetheart," she replied quickly. "Uninviting sounds so harsh. We're thinking of what's best for everyone." "Did everyone agree to this?" I asked. "Yes. Unanimously. No hesitation. The Beaumonts will be there. And after that incident, it's best not to cause discomfort." I knew what she meant. Delivering food to one of my father's wealthy clients had embarrassed them. "You understand, don't you?" she added. "These events can be overwhelming for you." "I understand perfectly," I whispered. "Good," she said, relieved. "Maybe next year, when you have a real career." The call ended. I stood there shaking, not broken, shifted. The family group chat finished the job. As I returned to the counter, messages rolled in. Elliot discussed champagne selections. Lydia compared dresses with Vanessa. Someone joked about hiring my delivery service. Then my mother typed, "Thank God we don't have to pretend this year." Before I could respond, the chat vanished. I'd been removed mid-sentence. A few days later, a gift arrived. A $60 cafe gift card. The note read, "For your breaks at your little job." New Year's Eve arrived cold and gray. During an afternoon delivery, I passed our family townhouse. Warm light spilled through the windows. Laughter. Glasses clinking. Even the doorman stepped forward gently. "I'm sorry, Miss Naomi. You're not on the list." "It's okay," I said, smiling through the ache. Back in my apartment, I sat with a bowl of noodles and opened my laptop. Clearcoin glowed back at me. 3 years of quiet work waited patiently. At 9 p.m., I scheduled the launch for midnight. My hands trembled as I clicked confirm. At 11:59, my family's countdown messages flashed on a device I hadn't logged out of. Best year yet. Family forever. I took one slow breath. When fireworks exploded over the harbor, I pressed launch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a notification. 1 download. Singapore. Then 10. Then 50. By 12:30 a.m., a tech blogger posted, "Finally, crypto explained like a human being." Downloads surged. I covered my mouth, tears streaming. "They like it," I whispered. By 2 a.m., subscriptions were rolling in. Emails flooded my inbox, investors, journalists, partnerships. At dawn, the counter crossed 120,000 users. I laughed and cried at the same time. By morning, financial headlines began to spread. Clearcoin was everywhere, and my phone wouldn't stop ringing. I sat on my couch, hoodie wrapped tight, whispering the words I'd never been allowed to say out loud. I'm not a failure. Unbeknownst to me, across the city, the Calder name was about to face a truth it had never prepared for. The sun crept through the thin curtains of my apartment like it didn't know it was stepping into history. I hadn't slept. My eyes burned, my head throbbed, and my hands still shook every time my phone buzzed, which was every few seconds. Notifications stacked on top of each other, so fast the screen lagged. Downloads. Subscriptions. Messages in languages I didn't recognize. Clearcoin was no longer just my secret. It had escaped me and was racing across the world without permission. At 6:12 a.m., an email arrived from Northline Ventures. The subject line read, "Urgent Partnership Discussion." I stared at it, heart pounding, then another came in. And another. By the time the kettle boiled, there were 12 unread emails, all marked urgent, all from firms I'd only ever read about in business articles while waiting for food orders to be ready. "This isn't real," I whispered, pressing my forehead to the cool kitchen cabinet. "This can't be real." But the dashboard didn't lie. Clearcoin crossed 150,000 users before breakfast. Premium subscriptions, priced at $19.99 a month, were converting at a rate so high it made my stomach flip. Numbers rolled upward like a slot machine that refused to stop winning. At 7:03 a.m., my phone rang with a California number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello. Naomi Calder?" a confident male voice asked. "Yes. This is Ethan Moore from Red Peak Capital. We've been watching Clearcoin since it launched a few hours ago. Your user retention is extraordinary. We'd like to discuss an investment opportunity." My mouth went dry. "Okay. Are you somewhere private?" I looked around my tiny apartment, unmade bed, folding table desk, a chair with one broken wheel. "Yes." "Good," he said. We're prepared to offer $38 million for 22% equity, effective immediately. The words hit me like cold water. 38 million? I repeated. Yes. And I'll be transparent. We're not the only firm calling today. The call ended 10 minutes later with promises, emails, and an official term sheet already on the way. I sat frozen long after the line went dead. By 8:30 a.m., 5 more firms had called. $42 million. $55 million. $63 million. Different percentages. Different conditions. All urgent. All aggressive. All unreal. I hadn't even brushed my teeth. At exactly 9:11 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, the name on the email preview made my chest tighten. Harbor Foundry Group. They were legendary. The kind of firm founders whispered about with reverence. The kind that didn't chase, you got chased by them. The call came seconds later. Naomi, the woman said warmly, this is Rachel Kim. I'll keep this brief. We're offering $85 million for 15%. You stay CEO. Full creative control. We move fast. I sank onto the couch. Rachel, I said slowly, forcing myself to breathe. I need time. She smiled through the phone. You have 2 hours. The moment I hung up, I laughed, sharp, breathless, almost hysterical. 2 hours ago, my biggest worry had been rent. Now strangers were placing valuations on my brain. I needed a lawyer. I found one through a late-night founder forum I'd lurked in for years, but never posted on. Daniel Reyes, Startup Counsel. Reasonable rates. Immediate availability. When his face appeared on video, calm and alert despite the early hour, I felt something close to safety. First rule, Daniel said after I explained everything. Don't say yes to anything until we read every word. By late morning, we were dissecting term sheets line by line. I learned new phrases: liquidation preference, board control, vesting cliffs. Each offer shimmered with promise and hidden teeth. At 10:46 a.m., my inbox exploded again. Subject: Clearcoin raises record funding. Valuation crosses $900 million. Someone had leaked. By noon, it was official. Headlines multiplied. Business channels ran my photo, pulled from an old cafe website, beside words like self-taught, overnight success, underdog founder. I stared at the screen, detached. Overnight success. 3 years of silence didn't count, apparently. That was when the messages from my family began. Missed calls. Voicemails. Texts that piled up faster than the investors. Naomi, call me immediately. We need to talk. This is unbelievable. Why didn't you tell us? I didn't answer. Not because I was busy, though I was, but because I wasn't ready to hear their voices rewrite history. At 2:04 p.m., my cousin Elena called. I picked up. They're losing their minds, she said without preamble. Your dad dropped his coffee when he saw the headline. Your mom keeps saying there must be a mistake. I closed my eyes. Of course she does. Naomi, Elena lowered her voice. He's telling people he guided you. That he always believed in you. Something bitter rose in my throat. He didn't even know what I was building. I know, Elena said gently. Everyone knows. The fallout spread quickly. At Elliot's firm, colleagues whispered behind glass walls. Isn't that your sister? Someone asked him, phone in hand. The Clearcoin founder? Elliot reportedly turned pale. Lydia found out during a meeting when her manager smiled too widely and said, next time, don't hide a genius in the family. Even Lydia's fiancé learned the truth when his team announced they were switching company onboarding to Clearcoin. Meanwhile, my phone stayed silent on purpose. That evening, another call came, one that made my heart stutter. Naomi, the voice said, smooth and unhurried. This is Julian Park from Summit Crest Ventures. I knew the name. We'll keep it simple, he continued. $120 million for 10%. You retain control. No board interference. 1 hour decision window. I looked at Daniel on the video call. He stared back, eyes wide but steady. This values the company at, I began. $1.2 billion, Julian finished calmly. The room felt too small. Daniel muted himself and mouthed, this is real. I nodded slowly into the phone. Send the documents. They arrived within minutes. At 7:18 p.m., after the most intense hour of my life, Daniel leaned back and exhaled. It's clean, he said. They're not trying to trap you. This is as founder-friendly as it gets. My hand hovered over the mouse. I thought about the cafe, the deliveries, the laughter at Thanksgiving, the doorman saying I wasn't on the list. Then I clicked sign. The wire would clear within 24 hours. But the announcement hit instantly. Clearcoin secures $120 million funding. Founder retains control. My phone lit up like it might combust. At the Calder townhouse, chaos erupted. According to Elena, my mother cried openly for the first time in years. My father sat in silence, staring at the television as if it had betrayed him. The same neighbors who once praised their discipline now whispered about their blindness. The next morning, a courier arrived at my door. Heavy cream envelope. Embossed lettering. The Calder family respectfully requests a private meeting with Naomi Calder at her earliest convenience. I laughed aloud. A meeting, I muttered. Now I'm worth scheduling. Instead of responding, I booked something else. A full floor in a modern office tower overlooking the harbor. Glass walls. Clean lines. A temporary assistant named Marla, sharp-eyed and professional. When they arrive, I told her, have them wait. How long? She asked. I checked the time. 45 minutes. The same amount of time I'd stood outside my family's home on New Year's Eve. When I finally stepped into the conference room, they rose instinctively. My parents. My siblings. Their spouses. No champagne. No smiles. Just nerves. My father spoke first. We're very proud of you. I met his eyes. You weren't proud 2 weeks ago. Silence. My mother reached for a tissue. We just didn't understand what you were doing. No, I said calmly. You didn't ask. Elliot tried to smile. We're family. Let's move past this. Family, I repeated softly. You called me a project. The room shifted. They tried apologies. Explanations. Offers of support. I listened. Then said, I want respect. And accountability. They leaned in, hopeful. And I want a $7 million donation to organizations supporting adults with undiagnosed ADHD. Quietly. No press. My mother gasped. You spent more than that on galas, I replied evenly. When the meeting ended, they left smaller than they arrived. At the door, my father whispered, I failed you. I didn't argue. As they disappeared down the hallway, I stood alone in the glass-walled office, watching the city below. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking to belong. I had already built something better. The weeks that followed moved faster than anything I had ever experienced, as if the world had suddenly pressed fast forward on my life. Days blurred into meetings, interviews, strategy sessions, and onboarding calls that stretched late into the night. Clearcoin was no longer just an app born in silence. It was a living organism, expanding rapidly, demanding leadership, clarity, and vision. Within the first month, we hired 120 employees. Engineers, designers, educators, customer support teams spread across 3 continents. People who believed in the mission, not just the valuation. We rented an entire building overlooking the harbor, its glass exterior reflecting the sky like a promise. When the sign went up, Clearcoin HQ, I stood across the street and stared at it longer than I should have. I remembered delivering food past buildings like this, never imagining my name would be attached to one. The media didn't slow down. If anything, it intensified. One headline called me the billion-dollar barista. Another labeled me the woman who humanized crypto. Reporters asked about my education, my background, my family. I answered selectively. I spoke about self-teaching, about perseverance, about the danger of underestimating quiet people. I did not speak about the group chat, or the Starbucks card, or the night I stood outside my childhood home pretending I didn't belong there. Some stories don't need to be repeated to be real. What surprised me most wasn't the fame. It was how little I wanted it. After the first chaotic month, I did something no one expected. I kept one morning shift a week at the cafe. Wednesdays. Same apron. Same counter. The manager nearly cried when I asked. You don't have to do this, she said gently. I know, I smiled. But I want to. The regulars noticed immediately. So, is it true? Mrs. Hahn whispered one morning, eyes wide. Are you really? I handed her a latte and winked. I still make coffee. She laughed, shaking her head. Don't forget us when you rule the world. I won't, I promised. And I meant it. Those quiet mornings grounded me. They reminded me who I was before the headlines tried to define me. Before people used my name as a headline instead of a human. Meanwhile, my family tried everything. First came the gifts. Expensive, curated, impersonal. I returned them unopened. Then came the apologies. Long emails. Voice notes filled with trembling emotion and carefully chosen words. I read them all. I didn't reply. Forgiveness is not the same as access. My parents began making public donations to neurodivergent support organizations. Interviews followed. My mother spoke about learning to embrace differences. My father spoke about regret and growth. They said my name often. Too often. People praised them. I stayed silent. Elliot's career began to wobble under scrutiny. Clients asked why his firm hadn't partnered with ClearCoin. Some assumed he was arrogant. Others assumed he was irrelevant. Lydia struggled too. Colleagues treated her differently now, measuring her against a sister she once dismissed. They all felt what I had felt for years. In June, we hosted ClearCoin's first company-wide gathering. A massive hall filled with hundreds of employees, investors, partners. Music pulsed through the room. Screens displayed milestones, user growth, global impact, testimonials from people who said the app changed their lives. One story stood out. A man from Nairobi wrote, "I never thought finance was for people like me. ClearCoin made me feel smart for the first time." I read it twice before stepping on stage. When the applause faded, a reporter asked, "Do you regret being estranged from your family?" I paused, choosing honesty over diplomacy. "No," I said calmly. Their rejection gave me clarity. It taught me that my worth isn't something they, or anyone, gets to decide. The quote went viral within hours. I became a symbol for people who had been counted out by the very people who were supposed to protect them. Messages poured in from strangers around the world. Students, single parents, immigrants, creatives, neurodivergent adults. Each one telling a version of the same story. They didn't believe in me either. As summer faded into fall, my family made one last attempt. A handwritten Thanksgiving invitation arrived at my office. My mother's handwriting was careful, almost fragile. "We miss you. Come home." I held the card for a long time. Then I set it down. Home was never the brownstone. Home was the place where I didn't have to prove my worth to sit at the table. I sent back a simple reply. "Thank you for the invitation. I already have plans." That Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner for people who had been rejected by families of origin. Former foster kids. Estranged siblings. Queer friends. Neurodivergent adults. Entrepreneurs who had failed before they succeeded. The table was loud. Messy. Full of laughter. It felt like belonging. December returned quietly, carrying the weight of memory. 1 year since the call. 1 year since the night everything changed. On December 20th, my phone rang again. It was my mother. "About New Year's Eve," she said softly. I waited. "We'd like you to join us this year." I heard the fear beneath her words. The need. The hope. "I appreciate the invitation," I replied gently. "But I already have plans." "With friends?" she asked. "With family," I said. "The kind I chose." New Year's Eve arrived clear and bright. The ballroom I'd rented shimmered with light. 300 guests filled the space. Artists, founders, caretakers, dreamers. People who had been told they weren't enough. People who rebuilt themselves anyway. We called it the Misfit Ball. Music echoed. Glasses clinked. Laughter rose without pretense. As midnight approached, I stepped onto the stage. 1 year ago, I began. I spent New Year's Eve alone because I wasn't welcome where I was born. The room grew still. But that night taught me something important. When a door closes, it doesn't always mean you're locked out. Sometimes it means you're meant to build your own door. Applause thundered. "Tonight," I continued, "we celebrate the people who chose themselves when no one else would." At midnight, confetti fell like snow. Cheers filled the air. I felt something settle in my chest that I'd never felt before. Peace. Across the city, my family watched the event on television. My mother whispered, "She looks happy." My father nodded. "Happier than she ever was here." "Do you think she'll come back?" Lydia asked quietly. "Only if we become people worth coming back to," he answered. On the balcony, overlooking fireworks bursting over the harbor, I breathed in the cold air and whispered, "I'm not the black sheep. I'm the one who broke the pattern." My phone buzzed. "Happy New Year. We're proud of you." I read it. I didn't reply. Not out of anger. Out of peace. I returned to the ballroom, lifted my glass, and made one final toast. To the misfits. To the overlooked. To the people who learned that family isn't defined by blood, but by belief. And to anyone watching this who's ever been told they don't belong. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Your story matters too. The room erupted. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I belonged.